good with these? Yeah. All right, good morning. Let's call the May 2019 CWCB board meeting to order in beautiful Gunnison, Colorado. Welcome, everyone. We'll get going on the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Jan, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 1 is review and approve the agenda. All right. Director Jan?
I move to approve the agenda.
It's been moved by Director Jan and seconded by, let's see. Thank you, Jessica. Director Brody, trying to wake up here, y'all. To approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Item 3 is approve or remove consent agenda items. Director Trick?
I would like to remove items 1A through C for further discussion.
Director Beatty.
I'd like to make a recommendation that those items be put in executive session since they are related to litigation. I'll revise the script accordingly, and then we would need to decide when we want to put them up for a vote. My recommendation is tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Okay, it's been recommended that we remove items 1A through 1C, move them to executive session and discuss them for a vote tomorrow. Is there a motion to that effect? Director Brody?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Brody and seconded by Director Jan to approve the consent agenda with the removal of items 1A through 1C, which will be considered an executive session. Well, that's sad. It looks like we skipped item 2, but we're in the consent agenda for a second, so we'll go back to that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, my apologies for skipping the minutes. So we'll go back to item 2, review and approval of the March 20th and 22nd, 2019 board meeting minutes. That was our meeting in Fort Collins. Are there any edits or changes to those minutes or a motion for approval?
I move to approve the minutes from the March meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Jan to approve the the minutes from the March 2019 board meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 4, board meeting dates in 2019. We can all see the list of the upcoming board meeting dates. So, are there any questions or discussion about those? Great. We'll move on to our director's reports. It's my understanding. Okay, great. We'll go to our DNR director, Director Gibbs.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine who's here, Gunnison County Commissioner John Messner. And John and I actually went to college here, and we've known each other for
I'd say well over 20 years. And but John, will you please come up and help welcome us? Tell us about Gunnison County, please.
So good morning. Like Dan said, John Messner, Gunnison County Commissioner. And first and foremost, I just want to welcome you all to Gunnison County and to Western Colorado University. We really do appreciate the CWCB being here and appreciate the work that you're doing. Obviously, Gunnison County being a headwater county, water is our lifeblood and is a very important part of our daily lives. This morning, I was actually out with my irrigation boots on, trying to figure out what to do with all the water because we turned on the ditches yesterday. And yeah, it was an exciting morning. But nonetheless, I want to thank you all for being here, welcome you to Gunnison County, and hope you enjoy your stay. So thank you.
Thank you for that kind welcome. I think we are all enjoying ourselves so far. Director Gibbs.
Yeah, great. Is this working? Here we go. Testing. Hello. Here we go. And I also think it's I can welcome you all too to this community. As a kid, we just lived just west of town, right where Gunnison River more or less turned about 70 degrees, I would say. So it was a great place to live where we always had at least 2 or 3 chocolate labs, learned how to fly fish, learned how to do some great mountain biking at Hartman's Rocks, and also had the pleasure of going to school here. We never had this beautiful student union when we were here, John. It was much, much smaller, but we both also were connected and were outdoor adventure guides for an organization called Wilderness Pursuits, which is still school-based and actually housed down here in the basement. And while I was in this Gunnison area, I was also active on the mountain rescue team and helped teach cross-country skiing. So this is where my family really come to get out of the hustle and bustle of Summit County at times. So I'm really excited to be here. Some updates for the Department of Natural Resources. It's been really busy, to say the least, as you could all imagine. The legislative session finished up a few weeks ago. Becky will give an update on some of the bills that pertain to water. But now that the session's done with, there's definitely some challenges and opportunities before us. In particular, how we do oil and gas in the state of Colorado with the passage of Senate Bill 181. And that did a variety of different things, but to start with, it really changed the mission in terms of, instead of fostering oil and gas, it moved it to the state, the COGCC shall foster oil and gas. We are also in a process of appointing new board members that will really be an interim board for about 1 year while this rulemaking will take place. And the phase 1 of the rulemaking, we're going to be looking at some really challenging, topics, everything from cumulative impacts to alternative siting analysis to public health, safety, and welfare to local government and flow lines. And then when we're done with that rulemaking process, it'll probably take about a year. Then there will be a new board that will be appointed by the governor, and that new board will be very similar to what the Public Utilities Commission has right now. It's not identical, but it'll be a paid full-time board moving forward. Let's see, Parks and Wildlife. We have a few finalists right now. We had interviews last week in Grand Junction for Parks and Wildlife Commissioner meetings. So I wish I could share with you the finalist names, but we're going to have those individuals, meet with the governor. And but we hope to have a decision within the next couple of weeks. But there's really some tremendous folks. We actually have 3 people right now that are in the mix that I think will be great. Let's see, goals of the Department of Natural Resources moving forward. I mentioned oil and gas, but one of the key goals is successfully reform COGCC and work towards a smooth implementation of the new rules and regulations. Another one is increase acres of lands available and accessible by the public and realign state land assets to administration priorities. And then the third is to identify and increase sustainable revenue source for parks and wildlife moving forward. And Russ, I know it's something that's you've worked on too as well, where, Parks and Wildlife is really almost solely, dependent on hunting and fishing licenses through the enterprise status. And we're going to work through a process to try to broaden the tent and figure out how we can look at a better new sustainable revenue source moving forward. So with that, I think that's it for right now. Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions, or we can always talk when there's breaks too.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. Any questions for Director Gibbs? Okay. All right, we will move on to our report from our IBCC Director, Director George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everybody. It's really a treat to be in this community when the weather is like this. 6 months ago would have been a different conversation, maybe 6 weeks ago too. But how lucky we are to live in Colorado, and how important it is that we're here at one of our fine institutions of higher education. Increasingly, as we go about our work, whenever we mention water, quickly we mention education. The two are linked, and the future that we're working on for water in Colorado is as much an education conversation as it is anything else. So it's nice and appropriate to be here. And I'm like you, Dan, that when I first started coming around Western State College, it was a very different place. My wife attended classes for her master's program in education here a long time ago. And we enjoyed it then, and it's nice to see how it's grown with the times. If you haven't taken a walk around the new campus, which is really now, do it. And speaking of water and this campus, Wayne Aspinall's presence is here. And you don't have to go very close to the river to see his life's work results with Blue Mesa and all of what that and its related components means. Also, you want to walk just a couple buildings to the east of us here, and you'll see a very impressive bit of artwork called the Mountaineer, a statue dedicated a few years ago. The Mountaineer is the mascot, I guess, of the college, and has been all the way along. But this particular display is also dedicated to a citizen of this community, Dick Bratton. And when you think about water in Colorado, and certainly in this part of the state, Dick Bratton always comes to mind. Dick's still around, probably still practicing the best law around, and it's nice to go see the dedication to him. So we're in a place where water matters, and delighted to be here. So on IBCC conversation, mostly I think what my message is today is there's a lot in motion for all of us. And certainly the goal of IBCC and its membership continues to be right in the middle of all of it, partly to learn and partly to determine how best members of IBCC and the entity itself can partner with CWCB, with DNR and the governor, with the individual basin roundtables, and really help collaborate and foster collaboration as the decision-making tool of choice. And if we've ever needed to do things together in water in Colorado, it's as important today as it's ever been. And so for many of us involved with IBCC, probably a lot like all of you and staff at CWCB, every day we try to think more how we can do something new and different and more effective, maybe more efficient in moving the marker ahead on solving many of these problems. Mother Nature's helping finally. So that's a really positive, and we needed a positive to begin each day, and we weren't getting that with the drought. I know it'll come back, but for now it's a blessing, and it can help us remember that as hard as we try as the humans, we're not in charge. So we continue to learn better how to collaborate with Mother Nature if at all possible. So some of the highlighting, to highlight some of the issues that really are at play, a lot of it's going to be part of our conversation the next 2 days, but one of the big ones came out of legislature, and that's the sports betting bill. Kind of an improbable partnership evolved there. I guess there was more planning than I knew for a longer period of time in anticipation of it, but it was pretty well handled, almost without notice. If someone would have asked me, and they did, and was it going to have a chance? No, it won't pass, can't pass, will not pass. Shows you what I know. Would it, if it did pass as a new betting opportunity in Colorado, what would the revenues be used for? Would they be used for water? No. Why would they? Shows you what I don't know about things. So happily, this opportunity is before us with some anticipation. There's really more work ahead than behind, but you have to take each step as you find it. And so we should embrace this opportunity, and it's going to take all of us to move it forward. As you know, before there's sports betting in Colorado, the majority of the citizens who vote have to say so, that it will. So that's the next step. And tied to that, of course, then is the spending piece, which includes the bulk of the money for our usual programs in water. So we have a significant vested interest in it. Lots of conversation needs to occur, and I know it is happening. A lot of work was done by volunteers, a very good team of established lobbyists, if you will, or folks that work at the Capitol on our DNR's behalf and others. They were a good team to work together to move this along, and they will continue to lead the conversations of, okay, what's left, what's next. And this particular bill did not actually include the appropriations authority. That will yet have to come. That there's nothing wrong with that. If you have to have money first before you can appropriate it. So that will come, but there's a lot of decision making that needs to occur. And we expect all of us, the IBCC membership and CWCB, to really weigh in on what does the governance look like that's going to administer and invest these new funds. It's not the cure-all, not the end. It's just the beginning. It's a down payment. We don't know what the amount available will become. It'll be somewhere between probably 10 and 40 or 50 million dollars a year. To me, that's real money. And it's almost a bird in hand. And so it is within our power to make it a bird in hand, and we should. And then that'll be at least this moment in time that we've moved all that forward. So lots more to come on that. And I'm happy to be a part of that. A lot of the work that's going on in our demand management program is staff-driven, as you know. I suspect a number of you are involved in either joining workshops or monitoring the work that's beginning to build there. I think we're all going to be and should be heavily invested in that. At some point, the IBCC is imagining that if there's to be some statewide modeling done on the demand management concept, that IBCC would volunteer its position and opportunity to do some of that modeling. It's sort of a no risk because it's IBCC, and we stand in a little different structure than, say, CWCB does or other interested entities, we can maybe have a free-ranging conversation about what this would look like to handle and manage the statewide aspects of demand management and all the related implications involving, in the first instance, the Colorado River issues. But the conversation will, of necessity, talk about other basin issues and other compacts and how what we do with demand management in this Colorado River conversation, what that means to everybody else. So that remains, that's an offer that we have on the table, and we'll see how that plays out. Very excited about the high quality of work that your staff is doing, setting up the demand management program. I think it's clearly an example being watched by lots of other interests outside Colorado. We're watching the good work going on by staff on what used to be called SWASI, now Analysis and Technical Update. It's moving forward well, and I've seen some pretty exciting new pieces. This is the sort of the data management side of things. It's all going to come together in the next year or so. And one of the things I want to highlight today that's really caught my attention is that the staff working on it has acknowledged that the IPPs sit as right at the fulcrum of where do we go from here in terms of projects for the future. And of course, you all remember how these identified projects and processes came through the water plan. We believe these are the most important, maybe the most ready, that we can really say this is where we go next. But when you start trying to get down into the detail and the weeds on it, it's all over the board. I mean, it's hard to prioritize. It's hard to list and say, yes, this one's ready to go. So the first money we invest in the water plan project completion is where and when and what's it going to cost. We don't know enough about that, and so they're really doing some intense study about how do we get our hands around that. And any conversation we have about raising new money has to have answers to that. I've said this so often that everyone's tired of hearing it. You have to tell the voters what you're going to do with the money before you can expect them to agree to tax themselves to give it to us. It's that simple. And in this case, this is where the action is going to be. And so, so far there's been some study about a matrix, take all the data sets. Each basin's IPPs look a little different, have different strengths and weaknesses. But to do this as a statewide function, we have to pull all that together. And they're building a pretty sensible matrix of characteristics and then bringing the data in and trying to make it all look the same so it fits and you can prioritize. It's a wonderful effort. And I think we'll probably begin to learn quite a lot about that. So that's just one example of the great work that's going on and that the basin roundtables are involved in directly. And so we'll continue. For example, we're going to have the Western Slope Basin Roundtable meeting coming up fairly soon. I've got the date here somewhere, maybe you already know, June 20. Western Slope Roundtables, for example, and the other groups of roundtables are also meeting, I think, through the summer. And we'll begin to talk about where are we on risk studies, for example, on the western side. But we'll talk about what does this technical update look like? How's that going to influence updating basin implementation plans? And we're trying to do this in a way that doesn't make planning become an end in itself, but use planning for what it's meant to be, and that's to get to the finish line. And so that's a big conversation at the Basin Roundtables, as it should be. And this effort on the technical update is really aimed right at helping us get the basin implementation plans not only updated and current, but productive. And that's really when things begin to bear fruit. So that's kind of where the action is for all of us who are wanting to think in the IBCC frame of that we're the reach around the whole state and try to blend the moving parts. So for some dates going forward that you might want to make a note of, there's American Water Works Association Conference in Denver on June 11, 12, 13, 14. I mentioned that because Greg Johnson and Russ Sands are presenting on the Colorado Water Plan. That's a big deal. This is a national, even some international aspects, and they're going to showcase the work that's being done there. That's on Tuesday, I think is the 13th. I mentioned the Western Slope Roundtables for June 20. And then in July, I think we're about to put together an afternoon of joint fun when the IBCC board will join you for a joint meeting. Are we firm on a date? Is it the July 18? Okay. And so it'll be part of your July scheduled CWCB meeting, but it'll be a chance to talk together. That's been done a few times, and I think really needs to happen, and will be a very valuable time. So plan on that, July 18. That's afternoon of the second day of that regular meeting. Then you want to do it? Okay, well, we're going to be, when I end, Dan and I are going to do something together. We need to do that. Yeah, okay. Who's leading on that dancing up? September 25 and 26 is the what we're calling the C9 Summit. This is your Basin Roundtable Summit. We're inviting all members of all the roundtables to Winter Park for a couple days, and it's going to be a fairly technical piece, but it's the education, it's the information, and it'll get us all together. So I think all of us intend to be there. It's going to be on your calendars too. So that's essentially it. That's what I want to do now. Why don't we talk about For the Love of Colorado?
Yeah. So Russ and I have been involved with, I'd say, leading water stakeholder groups in the state of Colorado with, the funders of looking at, Gates Family Foundation, Walton Foundation, nonprofits, governments, you name it, to really look at helping to educate the state of Colorado on where your water comes from, the challenges of water. And there's a brand new campaign that's going to be launched here in the next, month and a half. It's going to coincide with a big outdoor expo conference that will be, starting in Denver. And they're going to be using a lot of unique kind of experiential techniques to grab people's attention. For example, it'll likely be, maybe even like by a bus stop on a side while you're kind of waiting underneath an area there. You might have like half of a water there, and it may be trickling out so people can see, okay, where's your water going? There'll be a rock set up probably in front of the convention center where it'll look like people are like rafting or kayaking down a river section, but there won't be any river in it, or water in it, excuse me. And really a huge education campaign to coincide with this, funding ballot question. But I think there are a lot of key players that have been involved, and it's really exciting to see how much momentum and this campaign is really phenomenal to see.
It's the American way. It's marketing at its best, and it teaches. It really is designed to teach. But for those of you who have spent time in the classroom as a teacher, whatever it takes to get the attention of the student is what you do first, and then the teaching goes from there. And that's really what's happening here. It's very high class. It's going to be fun, but it's meant to reach all of us, not just the geeks of us, but this is for the people all across their homes and businesses across the state that are using water and really are ready to understand what is this drought that they're all talking about. What is this compact? What's going on here? This is what this is aimed for. And it's exactly the right way to begin the long haul that we're all working on to get the water plan into full fruition over the next few years. Questions for me or for the Director Gibbs? Thank you.
Director Schwartz?
Thank you very much. I missed the date on the Outdoor Expo.
I believe it's either at the end of June or early July at some point. It's within the next few months. But the campaign is, for the love of Colorado. So there'll be a, website for theloveofcolorado.com and
Great. Thank you for that report. Okay, our next report is from our CWCB Director, Director Mitchell.
Thank you. And thank you, First Director George, for saying all those dates so that I don't have to remember them. But we are looking forward to the joint CWCB board and IBCC meeting. I think that will be incredibly beneficial, but also that Basin Roundtable Summit where we can start really digging in deep on our basin implementation plans and moving us forward. Some good news. And on May 6th, the Water Availability Task Force met, and we're looking at a drought deactivation. We expect some news coming out of that soon. That's really positive. It's very unusual that in all parts of the state that we are not in some level of drought. So we'll hang on tight to that right now. We also now have to remember that we're looking at floods. And so with the lack of drought, we now are worried about floods. If it's not one thing, it's the other. So it is important to recognize that we have a consultant that does a daily flood threat bulletin, and that's reported directly to the CWCB and posted on our website. So if that's something that you're interested in, please be on the lookout for that. It's not only on our website, but there's Facebook and Twitter that keeps us apprised of that. Also in the news of water and what the staff is doing surrounding that, Ben Wade does these water festivals. And so you need to thank Ben Wade when you see him, because he is part of the education of our future generation of water leaders. And so at these water festivals, there's 4th and 5th graders that really focus on learning where your water comes from, what happens in drought, and what is Colorado water all about. And so there's 3 festivals coming up in Boulder on May 14th, at Colorado Mesa University, May 20th and 21st, Front Range Community College in Fort Collins on May 22nd. So Ben's really busy right now with these water festivals. And so I expect in approximately 20 to 25 years, we'll be inundated with people that want to take all of our jobs. So, and I think they'll be well prepared. If you've been to one of these water festivals, you'll know that. Some other big news, next week there will be a signing ceremony for the Drought Contingency Plan. This will be at Hoover Dam, May 20th. The bill passed through Congress and was signed by the president. And I think it really signifies the political will that occurred to get that through so quickly. If you were following that, you recognize that there was significant backing behind it with a broad level of support. So I think people really came together recognizing it was best for the basin. On some other news just came out today, the recovery program's budget is in a draft appropriations bill. So as it's written right now, it's for full funding for the recovery programs in San Juan, the Upper Colorado, and the Glen Canyon Adaptive Management Program. So we will be tracking that through the process. We all know that those programs are incredibly important to the state of Colorado and what we're doing to improve and move forward. In terms of other exciting news that's happening this month, the Salinity Forum is having its 100th meeting in Denver that first week of June. I think it's June 5th and 4th and 5th and 6th, something like that. the first meeting was held in Denver. This is the 100th meeting. This is a big deal. So if you're not familiar with the salinity program, it is a very successful state and interstate program. So there'll be representatives from all 7 basin states and the federal government and federal agencies. So it is a very successful program. We're happy to be hosting them. Also, the Upper Colorado River Commission will be back in Denver, actually in Director Gibbs' backyard in Keystone. And so we're happy to be hosting them on June 28th. Feel free to stop by that. It's open to the public. In in-stream flow news, I think I've talked to the board members, but I just want to make sure that folks know that as we look at these contested cases, that we are diligently working on those. And so we're cautiously optimistic that as we look at those contested cases, that we're meeting with any opposers and hoping to find resolution through stipulation. So I just want to let you know that's a lot of our plan for the summer of what we're doing. In terms of legislation, Director George mentioned the sports betting bill, but I wanted to talk about one other thing that was related to funding for the agency and for water projects in general. Senate Bill 19212 really codifies the water plan grant program in statute, which is incredibly important. It does this by specifying eligible projects, applicants, match requirement. All of this is consistent with the criteria and guidelines. This bill specifically appropriated $10 million of general fund to the Water Conservation Board, 8.3 of that going to water plan grants. So we are still getting good projects done, and I urge folks to apply for those and all of the different criteria that's eligible. But that other 1.7 million was allocated for demand management, the feasibility study, but not only the feasibility study, but it includes stakeholder outreach and the technical analysis. We know that everything we do it needs to include a huge amount of stakeholder outreach, and we need to not only outreach, but work with our stakeholders and bring everyone to the table, all interests, all types of stakeholders. This bill passed in both the chambers, and so we're happy about that. We'll be talking a little bit more in our agenda items tomorrow about that 8.3 million, so I urge you to actively focus on that. We still have loans. That being said, we talk a lot about grants and what we're doing with the grants, but I think it's always important to remember that the loan program is so critically important. If there's not a grant that you're eligible for, oftentimes you would be eligible for a loan. And selfishly speaking, the money that on the interest from those loans goes to the further good work across the state. So I think it's important that folks recognize that those loans are still out there and we have some of the best rates you'll find. In terms of some agency news, we have a public information officer position. I believe it closed at this point. And so we're looking to get someone on pretty quickly that really focuses on our interaction on the ground and markets our agency and our programs and what we can do for people that are doing good work on the ground. So hopefully by the next board meeting, I'll be introducing you to somebody new and dynamic that's out, and hopefully you already know them because they'll be out and about. We also have a professional engineer's position. You know that Anna moved to that COO position, which left a vacancy in the finance section. So there's a professional engineering position, and hopefully in the same token, you'll be meeting someone new at the next board meeting. In sadder news, Stephanie DiBattito is leaving us, not for greener pastures, but I think it's important to recognize that that there's a lot of when they're on when they work for the CWCB, and Stephanie's been working closely with the federal agencies and FEMA on flood and floodplain mapping and LIDAR and things like that. So she gained enough experience to leave us and move up in the world, and that makes me incredibly sad. So we'll be looking to fill that. Am I better? Nope. And I think that is all I have unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Director Mitchell. Are there any questions? Great. Thank you for that report. All right. Our next report is from our
Thank you, Madam. As you know, in recent meetings, as we've been in your backyards, your respective backyards, I've asked our division engineers to come and share just a few remarks with you, and I've done the same thing today. Bob Herford is here. I'll have him come up in just a minute or two. He's got a PowerPoint he's going to use to explain a few things to you. And before I forget, I just want to mention that a couple of his staff members are here. Jason Ullman, his assistant division engineer, is sitting in the back, and Tommy Rosman, one of our water commissioners. He has the unhappy task of administering water up on, I believe, Slate and East Creek, up near Crested Butte. So we can feel bad for that difficult duty that he has. But Bob will come up in just a minute. I wanted to spend a few minutes going around the state and touching on a couple things in each of your areas, and be a little brief about that and move along to Bob. Looking in the Metro and the South Platte and the Republican Basin, once again, Director Yan, I'm going to give one more update on the Republican Water Conservation District bill, and that did get passed and signed by the governor. And I think we knew it was headed that way, but I did want to just stop on the point and realize or recognize that there was a little difficulty with that. There were some water users in basically the South Platte River Basin that were also being included in the district, and they were understandably concerned and needing some certainty in that bill to make sure that they were basically not double counted, having to pay into two districts. And not only did the district work with those water users to correct that through a memorandum of agreement, but the bill, the legislation was also modified to specifically say that water users would not have to pay into two plans. That was a good move for that bill, and we're happy to see that the district saw a need for something and got that passed. With that bill, with that legislation passed, we will move ahead with our rules for administration, compact administration in the Republican. Moving to the Arkansas, Director Goebel's familiar with the fact that we do have a big issue in front of us. This is going to be discussed a little bit in executive session, but the concept of contract exchanges that are used to manage water in the Arkansas River Basin and allow water users like Director Goebel's organization, Lower Ark, Upper Ark, municipalities like Pueblo West, Colorado Springs Utilities to move water around. And we're working with the water users. I'm trying to put together another meeting with the water users for later in June to discuss that further. Stay tuned on that. It's an interesting discussion. In the Rio Grande, Madam Chair, we've had 2 compact meetings in your basin since the last CWCB board meeting, one for the Rio Grande and one for Castilla Creek. Rio Grande is a little bit more difficult, but fortunately for Colorado, occasionally being the upstream state has its advantages, and we've managed to stay not in the center of some litigation that's going on regarding that compact, and the compact meeting works a little more smoothly for us. That was without incident, and same for Castilla Creek. I was there for that compact administration meeting just last week. I want to mention also that in the Rio Grande, we've had reports of flooding on the San Antonio River, and the image, the mental image that we create when we hear the word flooding is sometimes a little alarming. But this is flooding that really results from high flows. It has to do with required compact deliveries, and water comes out of its banks in a few spots and inundates borrow ditches, roads, some low spots in fields. And we're working with, of course, Director Dutton and some of the water users in her area and to find ways to mitigate that on the short term and the long term. San Juan, Animas, La Plata, Director Hawkins, one interesting thing I lost track of you. There you are. One interesting thing that's going on there is working with our sister agency and a couple other water users in a water court application to deal with the concept of a reservoir being used for flood control and the water rights implications of that and the water administration implications of that. And I think we've found some ground. I don't want to get ahead of the respective parties' attorneys, but I think we found some ground to manage a situation where flows can be bypassed to make sure that a reservoir has room to handle high flows to protect from flooding. And of course, this is just the best year to be talking about that, especially in Division 7 and the turnaround that you all have done in your water year, Director Hawkins. So that's another one of those stay tuned items. In the Gunnison, Bob Herford is going to tell us more about what's going on. I always wanted to remind myself that in the Gunnison, in addition to the Gunnison River and the Uncompahgre and the reservoir that's just above us right now and the one that's below us and so on, we also have a North Fork of the Gunnison and the Grand Mesa. And what an interesting administrative task that is for Bob Herford and his team as we get to this time of year and we have numerous storage reservoirs up on the Grand Mesa, and they're still covered by feet of snow at a time when they would like to start operating outlet works and so on. It's an interesting administrative task. For the Colorado River Basin, Director Schwartz, I'm just going to say demand management and let that take care of itself later. Something we're all involved in. For the AMPA and North Platte, Director Brown and Director Trick, I just want to point out for you all that this spring, our division engineer, Aaron Light, sent notices to owners of water rights that she was going to begin in a more active way, as opposed to a passive way, enforcing the requirement that diversions have diversion structures and measuring devices. That issue, the lack of those devices, made itself present in a more difficult way when Aaron had to impose a call for the first time on the Yampa main stem this last year, and we've talked about that before. You all are aware of that. It's an important thing. It has its benefits, even as I just uttered the words demand management, even as we're talking about that. Having that measurement, having those good diversion records, having the records of good administration on those water rights is important, not just for the day-to-day work, but for some of the future things that could go on there. So Aaron is working hard on that. I do want to note that when Aaron ran that notice by me, we worked on it together to finish it, and I read that it ended with, if you have questions, please contact the Division of Water Resources. And I read that, and I just gave Aaron the friendly advice, well, you should include your name and phone number on that. And I saw Aaron at our annual meeting about a month ago, and she said, remember how you told me to put my name and phone number on that notice? And I said, sure. And she said, thanks a lot. But that's just a quick trip around the state, and I will let Bob Herford continue from here, and then, Madam Chair, if there are any questions for either of us, we can do it then.
Great. Thank you, Director Ryan.
Okay.
Mr. Herford, if you would state your name for the record, we'd appreciate that.
Good morning. I'm Bob Herford, Division Engineer, Water Division 4 in Montrose, and welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me, Madam Chair and members of the board and directors. This is fun stuff for us. We get a chance to show off some of the things and what's interesting in our neck of the woods. We're just waking up out of winter right now, believe it or not, but this is what it's going to look like in about another month. Isn't that beautiful? So I want to take the time to, I heard water matters. You bet it does. That's what we're here for. Water quantity as well as quantity, and I've got a little bit of discussion on that. For starters, everybody's kind of familiar of what the Gunnison Basin looks like. You see that red line there? That separates the upper Gunnison from our lower basins. That's all water that's tributary to the Gunnison River above the Gunnison Tunnel. Okay, that makes sense? Most of the water is, as Kevin was talking about, comes from the upper Gunnison, but we have the North Fork. That's our other water generator, and the Uncompahgre river basin. So on average, annually, about 1.5 million acre feet joins Colorado River main stem from these basins. We get our forecasts each year, runoff forecasts from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. And they rely on these snowtail sites. They're in the high country. What it doesn't really tell us is how much snow is really below that. And this year we had a lot. We had a long, cold winter, a lot of low snow. We've seen an April peak already. We've had a lower peak on the lower Gunnison of over 11,000 CFS already. Does everybody know what those snowtail measuring sites look like? So the NRCS operates and maintains these snow measurement stations in the high country. The main component, I should say, is probably this snow pillow down here at the bottom. This measures the weight of the snow that's above it. This gets translated by some instrumentation in the shelter and then gets fed up to a satellite station. And we can go online and look at these charts. These charts kind of track the snowpack. This chart is basically showing, it's a compilation of the gauges that are contribute to runoff into Blue Mesa. So this chart right here, this purple line represents an average snowpack year, excuse me. The light green line was 2018, pretty bad year, miserable year. As a matter of fact, I'll show some statistics. This year, big year. It's a whopper year. It's one of the top 5. And I've got another chart that kind of shows us comparatively. So 2018, this was the 4th poorest runoff on record since '69 when they started keeping records of the inflow into Blue Mesa. And we like to talk in terms of to kind of get our arms around and put a box around it. It's the April through July runoff that's tracked. Does that make sense? And 2018, 4th worst on record. Looks like we're going to end up probably about the 4th best on record this year. The May 1st forecast by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center was 970,000 acre feet. That's just runoff into Blue Mesa, April through July. I think the May 15th comes out today. It looks like the model is showing it about 990,000, somewhere around 1 million acre feet just into Blue Mesa. So I got some photographs here to show you. I think I'm going to skip this slide because I want to stay on track. This is what Blue Mesa normally looks like at the end of the irrigation season. This is an average year in 2007. This is what it looked like from the same position in 2002. I'm taking these photographs near the Highway 149 bridge that goes across the lake to Lake City, okay? And this is what it looked like in 2018. It was actually even a little worse. It was very, very bad. If you drive there today, believe it or not, just from the low snow runoff, the lake has come up nearly 30 feet. And Blue Mesa is a big reservoir. We're talking, it's 20 miles long. And that's a lot of water. So, and we haven't even seen the high stuff melt yet. It's still all sitting up on top. So it's going to be an exciting year. We've got some of the other interesting points I wanted to make out. I was thinking of that. Water matters. That was a really good slogan. And water quantity as well as quality. I mean, we've got the Upper Gunnison is going to be a huge producer this year. Quality-wise, I will testify and tell you that there is no other place in the continental United States where you can catch more rainbow trout over 2 feet long than right here in the Upper Gunnison. So you're in God's country. This is a really unique place. Enjoy your time here. And thank you for giving me that few minutes. And thank you for introducing our guys. And enjoy your meeting. Thank you. Any questions?
Bob, thank you for being here.
Okay, good.
Are there any questions for Bob or for Director Ryan?
Yeah, we're looking to a reprieve from last year. Last year was pretty miserable. Yep. Yeah. Now they're trying to figure out how to get rid of water.
Director Anderson?
I just want to salute Bob here. Him and his staff does a wonderful job in this basin, and Bob, as I hope you know, I appreciate your efforts and thank you.
You're very welcome. And last year was a struggle, but we did it, right? And that's what the storage is for. It did its job last year, and thank you. We're filling her back up right where it needs to be. Yes. Yeah. And the storage management is out of Blue Mesa, just so you know, is dominated by in the spring by releases for the Upper Colorado Endangered Fish Recovery Program, specifically to protect fish in the lower Gunnison, endangered species in the lower Gunnison. And actually in the winter, it's rather dominated by bringing the level down to meet certain icing elevation targets. When the elevation of the reservoir is above a certain point, there's ice dam occurrences that occur in the Gunnison and that push their way back up into the town. So those are competing things for water in the reservoir. Interesting facts. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Our next report with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Jackie Corday.
Good morning, everyone. First, I wanted to give you an update on a program that's important to CPW that's kind of similar but different than the work that Chris Sturm does. I think you're all familiar with the watershed and river restoration work that he does, but you may not know about what a program that CPW has that also funds this type of work. It's called CPW's Wetlands for Wildlife program. And each year, similarly to CPW or CWCB programs, we have an annual grant application, and it's usually always in the early summer that people can submit grants requests. And these the focus is to restore wetlands for fish and birds and wildlife. And so often, as you know, many wetlands were disconnected from the floodplain. If a river becomes incised, often the wetlands suffer because they get disconnected and are no longer hydrated. So a lot of the projects also restore sections of streams and reconnect and rehydrate those wetlands. And so it's about 1.5 million each year. It varies, but that's been about the average. And so the applications come in the summer, and then they're awarded at the end of the summer, and usually they're the projects are constructed the following year. So just wanted to let you know about that program. The second update that I had was to fill you in again on our low flows planning. So in response to the drought last year, we started becoming very proactive on trying to plan with our aquatic biologists about what reaches of streams, if we had priorities, what those priorities would be for trying to work out solutions for keeping them flowing. And so our in-stream flow program manager, Katie Burge, worked with all of our 18 aquatic biologists over the winter to work with them to determine what would their priorities be and put that in a spreadsheet. And so now that's phase one of our planning, and that has been done. And now she's turned it over to other CPW staff to start looking at what solutions can we find in-house with our own water rights and the way that we use our water rights. And then we'll also be meeting with partners such as Western Resource Advocates, the Colorado Water Trust, Trout Unlimited, and folks like that to help implement where we can't find a solution in-house. Are there other solutions that they can help us implement? So that work is going to be continuing into the summer. And the third thing and last that I wanted to mention is how much work went into from January into April on the WOTUS rule and commenting on that. There was a lot of CPW staff time, as well as within DNR and the AG's office and the Department of Ag and CDPHE. All of those agencies came together and worked really hard to come up with a joint state letter. And it was super important to all of us. It's the waters of the United States. What that definition means a lot as far as what the Army Corps of Engineer jurisdiction is, and for 404 permits and water quality issues. So I wanted to let you know that one of the things that we worked on, CPW, in collaboration with CDPHE, was drafting a white paper that became part of the letter. It was called Biological Importance of Ephemeral and Intermittent Streams and Non-Adjacent Wetlands in Colorado, because of course that is what the rule was going to roll back, having jurisdiction on. And so our biologists came together to help write that paper. And in the end, I was so proud of the letter and how all the agencies worked together to come out with a really great substantive letter. So it did Colorado proud. Just wanted to let you know that. And that went in, it was signed by the governor and AG Phil Weiser on April 15th and was submitted to the EPA. And that's it.
Thank you, Jackie, for that report. Are there any questions for Jackie? Yeah, Director Schwartz?
Thank you very much. It'd be nice to have a copy of that letter, if we may. Thank you.
Okay, I think there's a Water and Power Authority report in our packets, but I'm not seeing anyone here. So that brings us to the end of our reports. Director Gibbs, I understand you wanted to welcome an audience member.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to just recognize a longtime friend of mine, Aaron Minks. Aaron, maybe come on down for one second. Aaron's the Senior Advisor of Rural Affairs for Senator Bennett, and we worked together many years ago.
We did, with a lot of you
in
here.
the San Luis Valley, but
yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Director Gibbs. I have to get used to that. Sorry, I'm still congratulating you. Yes, a lot of you are very familiar to me, and folks in the audience too. It's great to see
Aaron?
everybody.
Sorry, before you get too wound up, would you mind introducing or stating your name for the record?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Dutton. My name is Erin Minks with Senator Michael Bennett's office. So I just wanted to run up to catch the meeting. Our staff is spread thin across the state, and my role with Michael is I do rural policy, and I also am part of his natural resources team. So I do a lot of the water policy with him, as well as others in your basins who hopefully you all know well. And just happy to be here today to listen, to hear what topics you guys are working on. I don't know if we have a copy of the WOTUS letter, but it would be great just to have it flagged for us. It's obviously a very thorny federal issue, and I imagine we've been following it for quite some time. I also have some good news to share for folks, for Kevin and for Chairwoman Dutton. The CREP continuous enrollment was reopened today. So we were able to share that news this morning with USDA, basically the USDA side. A lot of the challenges there were, quite frankly, a due diligence regulatory review that the agency was doing on their side, but unfortunately we'll probably lose a lot of the enrollments this year in the Rio Grande Basin. But for the rest of you, you all know this is a key piece of the federal structure for the groundwater management strategy occurring in the San Luis Valley to potentially be successful if farmers will sign up. So we'll see where that goes, but it's exciting to be here. I'll be here till mid-afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for being here. Yes, Director Schwartz.
Thank you. And with regard to the Water Resources and Power Development Authority, Chris Treese is here, a new member of that board. I don't know if he would have any comments.
Thank you. Chris Treese, as a member of the Power Authority, is there anything you'd like to add to Director Brode's report to us?
Absolutely nothing. Thank you.
That's perfect. Great. Okay. Looks like we're going to move on then from our director's reports. Oh, Director Beatty.
I just received a text message from Director Greenberg. She just got out of knee surgery and is unable to attend. She sends her regrets and flag things for her if we have questions for her, and we should all fill her in on matters that are important for the Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll all be sending our wishes to Director Greenberg for a speedy recovery. Okay. Thank you for those wonderful reports. That was very informative, and I always appreciate hearing from each of you. So thank you for taking the time to be here and to share with us. That was great. The next item on our agenda is item 6, the Diane Hoppy Memorial Scholarship.
Good morning, Anna Moss for the record. This is agenda item 6, as Director Dutton said, a Diane Happy Memorial Scholarship Fund. This is the first year that we're looking at awarding this scholarship, so it's pretty exciting to be a part of this. I'm sure most of you here know Diane, but for those in the audience maybe who didn't know Diane, she was a board member on this board. She was appointed in 2012. She served as chairwoman in 2015. She was part of the Colorado House of Representatives from 1999 to 2006. She was also a founding member of Water Education Colorado, where she was president for 5 years. And so water education was something near and dear to Diane's heart. Unfortunately, she passed away in February of 2016. And so in alignment with sort of her wishes, her family established the scholarship fund. And so it's administered between the CWCB and the Denver Foundation. So again, this is the first year, and staff got the opportunity to review the applications that came in. We did receive 2 applications. They're in your board packets. We did redact the names of the students because they're minors. We thought it was important to protect their privacy. So hopefully you all are okay with that. And I'll tell you, it's a different perspective reviewing grant applications from real human beings, students that they have these big dreams and aspirations, totally different than reviewing just a project. And so it's kind of tugs at your heart a little when you're saying, gosh, I have to tell someone yes and someone else no. And anyway, that was a unique experience. Both of these students that applied were really, really impressive. Their resumes are just incredible. We are recommending student number 1. This woman is interested in agricultural business and animal science as her undergraduate degrees, and then intends to study water law in the future. She clearly is a leader in her community, very involved in the FFA, and her letters of recommendation were just incredible. And certainly student number 2, also very impressive resume. He was a little more interested in renewable energy, maybe a little bit less so in water. And so it was really for that reason that we decided to opt for student number 1 as the recommendation. And really that's all I have for you this morning.
Are there any questions for Anna? Director Jan.
I just want to say, I filled in for our former director, Hoppy, as the director of the South Platte, so I knew her well. And thank you, Anna, for doing this work. And I know it's something that they wanted to do for a long time, and so I'm glad that it's coming to fruition here. So I just want to thank you for your work that you did to make this happen.
Director Schwartz.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I think we had 2 excellent candidates and probably a difficult decision, but I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we had an urban student, East High School student, interested in these issues. And, as we need to work both sides of this issue, rural and urban. And also, I think it's an honor to recognize Director Hoppy. She's missed and her role in the water world, but this is a great way to remember her.
Thank you. Director Jan?
Well, with that, I would, just so you know, my alma mater is Caliche High School.
Oh.
So, but I just want you to know, I have no relatives graduating this year, so, which is unusual, actually, but, so there's no conflict of interest there. But with that, I would move to approve staff recommendation to award the $2,000 scholarship to student number 1.
It's been moved by Director Jan and seconded by Director Brown to approve staff recommendation on item number 6. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Oh, sorry. Director Hawkins.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I am really excited to have the student who is awarded the scholarship come before the board. So thank you for including that as part of the scholarship.
Thank you for that comment. Any more discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Anna. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Bear Creek reallocation. Bear Creek Lakes reallocation, excuse me.
Maybe PowerPoint wants to open it. All right. Good morning, everyone. For the record, Eric Sky, and I get to kick off the Interstate Federal and Water Information Section Marathon this morning. I'll be presenting Agenda Item 7, the Bear Creek Lake reallocation. So the reason that I'm up here today chatting with you all about this is an informational item, but work has really been starting to ramp up on this project once again. And so we're getting closer to a potential action item coming up either this summer in July or the fall in September. That's probably the more conservative estimate here. But I really wanted to take today to lay some of the background information down, why we're talking about this lake, how we've gotten where we're here or where we are now, and what that potential action item may be coming up. So, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? This is Bear Creek Lake. It's located southwest of Lakewood, Colorado. It was originally a flood control structure, part of the Tri-Lakes project, originally authorized in 1958. This bad boy can hold a total of 57,678 acre feet at the spillway. Currently, we're only allowed to store 2,000 acre feet, and that's because it's primarily a flood control dam. Well, in 2015, the Army Corps of Engineers approached us with a reconnaissance study. They had gone out, taken a look at the dam, and said, I think that we could probably store 20,000 acre feet of additional water supply in this reservoir, and it can still maintain that flood control purpose. And so we, of course, went, heck yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's start working. So what does 20,000 acre feet look like? That's what this light blue shade is around here. That's what the additional 20,000 acre feet would look like on top of the 2,000 we already have. Lakewood, City of Lakewood, actually manages all of this land on behalf of the Corps as part of a regional park. And as you can see, that huge footprint there is a large concern for the City of Lakewood. They've expressed this concern to the board before when we came back in 2016. And we continue to work with Lakewood every day because this park is extremely valuable to them as they have a lot of folks that visit it every day. And you can see that's a large impact. And I wanted to see kind of what that 20,000 acre foot impact is compared to the 2013 and 2015 floods that also had a massive impact on the park. So I apologize, it's red. GIS was not working for me this morning, so it had to stay red. But the 2013 floods are just underneath that 20,000. So the grand total for the September 2013 floods was around 18,000 acre feet in the reservoir. 2015 was just a little bit less. So you can see that 20,000 acre feet really takes up a little bit more space. So we also have set aside money for all of this. We have our funding put aside. The Army Corps wants to do a 50-50 cost share on a feasibility study that would also count as the EIS. Back in, it was Senate Bill 2016-174, and the CWCB put aside $2.5 million to go towards this feasibility study. Well, recently, the Army Corps got their money allocated, and it turns out that they're thinking it's going to be a $3 million and 3-year process. So that means that we would only need to put up $1.5 million potentially, and they would only need to put up $1.5 million. Of course, there's room in the contract and the agreement. In case we do need to, we can go above that, but we also have the option to terminate the contract if it does. And that cost share agreement is actually, we should be getting a final copy of that to sign this week. And then once we sign it, we'll send it back to the Army Corps of Engineers. And after they sign it, that kicks off this feasibility study process. And it is going to be a whirlwind. So I'd like to take some time real quick to say that we do have a team at CWCB working on this. We've got Lauren Riss, we've got Amy Moyer. We're trying to recruit Megan Holcomb right now. So if you're listening, no pressure. And we have the rock stars, Jen Mealy and Philip Lopez from the AG's office working on this. So we've got
great set of folks ready to go when this kicks off. Now, I've been speaking with the Army Corps about when is best for them to sign this and kick off this entire thing, because as soon as they sign it, that first 3-month scoping period begins like that day. And they are currently dealing with quite a bit of flooding out in Nebraska. So once we sign it, send it off to them, they're going to try and sign it as soon as they can get their team assembled. They are thinking that could happen as early as June, but they're going to make sure that they're not going to lose that $1.5 million that they already have set aside. So now on to the second part of this project in your memo. I kind of flipped up how I wrote the memo, but what about water rights? We decided that for this particular reallocation project, we wanted to provide another avenue for stakeholders to participate. So in March of 2016, we asked the board to declare their intent to appropriate a 20,000 acre-foot storage right in Bear Creek Lake, and that was approved back then. And we've been working ever since then, try and get folks involved, try and figure out how much water's available, what kind of constraints there are, all that good stuff. And we actually hired Brown and Caldwell to do an engineering study. They had 3 areas that they were looking at, and this is in that one of those attachments that I had in your folder there. So I won't go too into detail, but on average, Brown and Caldwell saw that the water availability is 20,000 acre foot. Awesome. We also did an exchange analysis just in case folks want to bring water up, if they want to take water elsewhere. So we looked at from the South Platte to where Bear Creek, from the South Platte to the lake. That's our first exchange. Found that on average, you can get 29,000 acre feet in that reach for exchange. From the South Platte below Burlington up to the Bear Creek Lake, it was seen that it was about 22,000 acre foot on average exchange potential. And then from the South Platte up to Chatfield, in case folks wanted to move stuff from Bear Creek up to Chatfield, if that's what they want to do, there was an exchange potential of 77,000 acre feet. Now, I should say that a while ago, this was investigated and it was determined that because of water quality issues and the water availability, they decided not to go forward. So this study has happened before. However, things have changed. Water quality is a lot better now, and that's thanks to our friends at the Bear Creek Watershed Association. They've been working very hard to make sure that the water quality in this lake is up to standard. And in fact, we put it up against Stanley Lake, Milton Reservoir, Bar Lake, Chatfield, and Cherry Creek, and it did better than almost every single one. Stanley Lake is the only reservoir that had better water quality than Bear Creek Lake. Now, we also did a little outreach effort. After we found out what that potential unconstrained yield could be, what the water availability was, what the exchange potential was, we started presenting that information to folks. And we got ourselves a list of stakeholders who are very interested in participating in this project. And this table comes from a recent effort that we're having Brown and Caldwell do, which is a modeling to see how this reservoir is going to look operationally speaking. So these pool sizes you see here are the pieces of the pie that these different entities would like out of this water rights or out of the storage space in general. And Brown and Caldwell did complete a draft analysis right now, but we still have to do a little bit more outreach effort based on the results that we got here. We have to see if they're comfortable with this, if they want to continue to move forward, and then we'll do a final draft, and that's when I will present, or when we'll be able to share that information publicly and with you all here. So for this first run, Berthoud wanted 3,000 acre feet, Brighton wanted 6,200, Tacona wanted 3,000, Evergreen wanted 100. Now Foothills Parks and Rec, they are actually only bringing in their own senior rights. They were not interested in this junior right. Hidden Valley is looking at 50 acre feet, and then this potential environmental pool. We've been consulting with CPW, specifically Carlin Armstrong, Katie Birch, Pete Konovitz, to figure out what is the potential environmental pool that we would need in order to mitigate anything. So we had a meeting with them, and preliminary estimates, don't worry, Carlin, I'm making sure it's estimates. They said that they may need about 15 CFS from April 1st to October 31st and 7 CFS the rest of the year. Again, everything here is preliminary as of now. And after doing all the modeling, we saw that we could meet those needs with around 4,550 acre feet. These are just the base estimates. I'm told that CPW is going to be going out this summer to take some cross sections and make sure that we fully capture what would be needed here. So that's where we are with that. We've got, like I said, all these are preliminary and may change. We've got another round of calls with all those stakeholders that I mentioned coming up in the next few weeks. Brown and Caldwell and staff will be reaching out and saying, hey, here's what we found. What do you think? Do you think you could go for more? Because this table only represents 16,900 acre feet. And a couple of those folks did express interest in more if there is availability. So we'll be reaching out to folks, seeing how to move forward. And then that's where one of these next steps comes in. So after we get that, this is what we want. This is what it's going to look like. We'll be drafting up an application. And by we, I mean Jen and Phil, because they're awesome. And that will be the potential action item coming before the board, probably September. I would, push for it as soon as possible, but probably September. And we'll be asking the board for permission to file on that right. That'll be the action item coming up. As far as next steps on this reallocation process, we'll be finalizing that cost share agreement that I mentioned. That should be in our office this week. And then we're going to kick off that scoping process. So that's where we are with that project. Any questions?
Great. Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions? Director Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a question on the environmental pool.
Mhm.
I'm noticing in the packet it was 6,885, and then you said it was in 4,000 something.
Yes.
What accounts for the difference? And
So the
secondly,
estimate.
are there estimates? Everything's estimated. And then are there any environmental concerns associated with the enlargement?
Yes, thank you for the question. I really do appreciate it because I did not specify that at the beginning. The table that was provided in your memo does have different values from what is provided here, and that was because we met with Brown and Caldwell on Monday, and these are the results they came up with. So that environmental pool that's in your memo, the way that I calculated that was doing the 15 CFS times 1.98 times however many days, and then the 7 CFS times 1.98 times however many days, which ended up being 8,200, but we didn't have that amount in the water right available based on the other space that was taken. And so I just took the 20,000, subtracted out what was there. And I should mention that we also have 4,000 acre feet, well, 3,989 already in the reservoir. And so kind of accounting for all of that, that's why that number in your board memo is 6,000. And that's why the number up there is 4,500. Yes. The environmental impacts, that is going to be coming from this process. So this entire feasibility, scoping, all that good stuff, that is the environmental impact statement. That's going to be the feasibility of whether or not we even can do this storage. So that's going to be wrapped up in the next 3 years. And I wish I could give you more information on this process, but this is a brand new core process and we're kind of the guinea pigs on it. So to be honest with you, we're kind of going to be learning as we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How would it differ from Chatfield?
In what way?
In the process, when you say this is a new process, how would it differ from the Chatfield reservoir expansion?
That is a good question. I was not involved in the Chatfield process. It's this 3-year, $3 million process that's new to the course. So trying to get this feasibility study, the environmental impact statement done in 3 years is going to be the new process.
Director Yan?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I like this project. And, when we decided to do the appropriation, one of the concerns was that we didn't want it to be a speculative process. And so that's why we sent you out to try to get partners. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate you guys beating the bushes and finding people that need the water so that we're not looking at something that's speculative in nature when we file our appropriation. So I just want to thank you for your work on this and all that you're doing to get partnerships here.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay. We're on to agenda item 8, which is Colorado's decision support system update.
Good morning, Brian McPherson. I'm in the Interstate Federal and Water Information section, and I'm here to give you an update on Colorado's Decision Support System, CDSS. This is the first time I've presented here, and I'm not sure if many of you have heard of a presentation on our program, so I just wanted to give you some history, background, what it is, and why it's so pivotal for support of programs within the CWCB and for water users statewide. So I'm going to be giving you an overview and history of the program, how we coordinate with DWR in the program, the history from the inception in 1993 of the Colorado River Decision Support System through today, some recent advancements, including how this program supports other agency needs as well as for the public, and a slew of projects, recent examples of projects that use the tools that we create and how that helps in water resources planning, and then future needs for the program. So what is CDSS? Really, it's a water resources toolbox for decision making. I'll first start by saying it's a public toolbox, so we use it in state as well as water users around the state. So things that it includes is water data, which we call it's a database called Rehydrate. So all of the data that water commissioners and division offices around the state collect from DWR goes into this database that we publish online. Spatial data, modeling software, so state mod, state CU. So a lot of the modeling we've heard about to look at questions of water resources issues are done through those pieces of software that we create. It's unique that a state produces software to look at these sorts of issues. Modeling data sets. So we're in the midst of ARC-DSS, the Arkansas River DSS. And in these basin DSSs, we create model data sets in state mod that anyone can use to do what if kinds of questions. Web applications to access data and crunch numbers. Memos, reports, and basin DSSs. So this is a great resource for that's collected during the DSSs that really captures how water is managed around the state. And the program was really set up to support three areas from its beginnings in 1993, and that's interstate compact policy analysis, water resources management, and water rights administration. And I think really it hasn't strayed far from those three goals since then, in that it does support all three of these areas pretty critically, even today. So it's a joint program between the CWCB and DWR. The CWCB has 3 employees in the water information subsection. And DWR in the state engineer's office has about 10 employees that regularly contribute to CDSS in different sections of their agency. Enhancements of the program have typically come through the basin DSSs. So each basin has had a DSS done for it. Colorado River, Rio Grande, South Platte, and we're now in the midst of the Arkansas DSS, which is the final DSS to be done. And an average of close to $1 million per year has been contracted from the CWCB in support of this program from the projects bill for consultants and projects to be done through grants since 2001. So the Rehydrate, which you probably are pretty familiar with as water users, really is the collection of data that's gathered through administration. So diversion records, well metering, stream flow, water rights is a big one, call chronology, aquifer levels, climate data. So this data is all gathered around the state and put into one central database that's easy for the public to access and use for analysis. We've recently revamped our web tools and our website, all through in-house staff, in order to access this data in a powerful, user-friendly way, through a modern web interface. So, some of the tools, are things like water rights analysis and transactions, structures, so diversion records, and the map viewer, which is a new web application to view geospatial data. Again, it's very useful and powerful for anybody to access this geospatial data. Also, our modeling data. So like I mentioned, State Mod and State CU are critical for studies, planning studies around the state. And State CU specifically is used for analyzing agricultural consumptive use, which is obviously very important for compact analysis and changes of water rights, things like that. So some recent advancements in the past year or two that we wanted to highlight are the ArcDSS, which is the final basin DSS, which we're in the midst of at the moment. And like all the other basin DSSs, the products are modeling tools for the basin, GIS layers of irrigated acreage and crop typing. One thing that's unique to the Arkansas that we're doing this time around is administrative tools for Division 2, which are tools that they specifically requested to help them administer their water rights in their basin. And lots of data gathered and published through reports and memos, interviews with water commissioners, interviews with all of the large water users, district memos, and these really are a great resource that's not available other places to offer insight into how things are administered. Just in a meeting on Monday, we were talking about how great it is that we are capturing John Martin Reservoir operations for Division 2 staff as they transition, retired water division engineer, having these sorts of operations documented is really useful for them. OpenCDSS is a process we're going through where we're moving our software development to an open source environment, which gets kind of geeky, but it's a way that we're working on aiding in longevity, collaboration, and transparency with our software. So anyone around the state knows the nuts and bolts of how the models operate if they're savvy enough. And like I said, the overhauled website, web tools, and map viewer. Again, we're proud that all that work was done in-house between DWR and CWCB. And our website recently won an award for government interactive media. So we're pretty proud of that. So who uses CDSS? Internal, CWCB, DWR, Attorney General's office, staff. Pretty much all of the sections within the CWCB use the tools. For example, the water plant technical update is performing state mod modeling around the state to look at climate change and all the scenarios that they're looking at. Stream and lake protection uses the tools for water court, and a good example again is these new admin tools in the Arkansas. There's a new alert system so that water users can be alerted when other water users run exchanges or make reservoir releases. So they're using that to protect their in-stream flow rights. Our section uses it for demand management analysis, lease fallow analysis. There's a lease fallow tool, and depletion accounting for various federal programs like the endangered species, PBOs. The Attorney General's office has recently used it for compact analysis in the Colorado River, and DWR uses it for administration. Publicly, water users for planning, permitting, and water court regularly use the CDSS tools in the stream management plans, planning modeling, permitting, EIS type modeling, HCU analyses for changes of water rights, call analyses for, say, junior storage rights, and reservoir sizing. So I'm going to give you some recent examples of projects that have utilized CDSS, just to give you an idea of the breadth of projects that take advantage of it. So like I said, internally in our section, we produce depletion accounting for different programs. For the PBOs, the AMPA 15-mile reach in San Juan, UCRC modeling uses our estimates of depletions in state in Colorado to inform their modeling. the Bureau of Reclamation, the various studies they produce on depletions in the basin. Compact analysis, in the Colorado and the Arkansas for the HI model. There have been other compact studies in the past too, but these are the most recent two that come to mind. Administration within the various DWR divisions. Rio Grande groundwater, the new rules and regulations, the mod flow model they use was the Rio Grande DSS mod flow model. Transit loss in different basins, the Green Mountain historic user pool analysis, stream management plans. Have used our spatial data quite a bit to look at, as well as flow analysis and that sort of thing. The BIP modeling, some of the roundtables have really run with their state mod models. Yampa White comes to mind. They've really used their basin implementation plan model to look at energy needs in the White, for example. Supply analysis and drought plan modeling. Various users around the state use state mod modeling for looking at their needs in the future or looking at drought needs. The SWASI modeling, like I mentioned before, is going to be using all of the state mod models in each basin to look at needs and the gap and all that kind of stuff. CRWAS, CRAS Phase 2, again, was another study of the Colorado River basins, looking at climate change and supply for the West Slope. The West Slope Risk Study, the West Slope Roundtables and the River District are they're doing sort of a joint modeling exercise of the states, the upper basin states, their Reservoir model combined with our state mod model within Colorado to look at, and they're using our model to feed into their model. So that's a pretty unique application that we haven't seen before. But that's how they're doing all of their Colorado modeling, since the other model that they use doesn't really do Colorado water rights. System conservation pilot programs, academic studies. There have been some really interesting studies out of NCAR, Stanford, School of Mines, looking at different academic type applications of the Colorado water resources issues. And just recently we heard that we're going to be using it for the Trinidad Reservoir 10-year review with the Bureau of Reclamation. We're going to be using our ArcDSS model. So some bold statements that I just wanted to put out there are that Colorado's prior appropriation system, interstate compacts and agreements, and federal permitting are all data-driven. We know that all of these processes rely on good data and good sound analysis of that data. And almost every project, process, or decision involving Colorado's water resources in one way or another relies on CDSS. So I just want to underscore the importance of the program, and that we're proud of the work that's been done since the 90s in this program. The future needs, like any good program, there's always things that we need to improve upon. Irrigated acreage, particularly in the West Slope, is very important for compact considerations. An understanding of what our use is as it pertains to the compact is, of course, important. Crop ET estimation techniques. There's various techniques on how you estimate what crops consume, and that varies sort of basin by basin and state to state in the West. So making sure we're up to the standards of today, as well as understanding the implications of what the techniques we use is critical. Continued support for the web access. So like I said, we just did this big revamp of our web presence, but of course, as we know, there's always things changing with mobile and making sure people are able to access the data through the web. software, model data sets. Phase 2 of ArcDSS is on the near horizon, and we worked a little bit with Jack recently on scoping for that. New data types into Hydrabase, and of course, outreach and training. We just had a workshop a few months ago in Denver where probably close to 60 or 70 people attended to, keep current with what we're doing. We're going to make sure to keep doing workshops like that between CWCB and DWR. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Brian. Director Mitchell.
Yeah, I just have to say a few words because Brian's been with us for, I think, since March of last year.
Yep.
So this being the first time that he's up here and presenting, I want to let you know what it signifies because as we see, it's not just Brian presenting on our award-winning database, but it really represents the way that we're moving towards the future. As we're looking at our technical analysis for Colorado's water plan, and it has a focus on climate change and an environmental gap and different ways that we're looking at things that are that we haven't before. That technical work and the data happening within our agency is incredibly important. And as we look at water projects for the future, we need to have good, accepted, non-biased data, and that's what this is. And so, it gives us a history. So Brian is a huge asset. In previous years, you would have had a slew of consultants behind him, or they would have been presenting and we would have just introduced. The fact that we have that technical expertise in-house now is huge for our agency. And I think it's important that we recognize that. So thank you, Brian, and congratulations on your first presentation.
Thank you, Brian.
question.
Director Gibbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and especially since this is your first time, we have to ask a couple questions, right? This may be a stretch, but is this something that the DSS process, especially looking at geospatial information, could be used in non-traditional ways? For example, here in Gunnison County, let's say there's a major catastrophic wildfire and an incident commander comes in from South Dakota that may not know the landscape very well, may not know ownership of certain reservoirs and so forth. Is that something that potentially that incident commander could tie in and get a better understanding of availability and ownership and so forth as well?
Yeah, I think that's, what you said is a great example and a great hope for what tool is used for. You're exactly right that it's a great way to identify structures. I think in terms of administration, there have been instances where there have been things like fire. I'm thinking of, Levita Pass last year in Division 2, where even people who know the basin can use tools, the geospatial tools, map viewer, to identify where exactly things are. Because we're used to looking at straight line diagrams where it's just a line on a piece of paper, and with the new map viewer tools, it really gives you the mapping component of it that's critical to understand where things are. So, yeah.
Director Gibbs, it's really interesting that you bring that up because Monday I was sitting down with the staff from our supervisor's office with the U.S. Forest Service in Monte Vista, and we were going through using these tools and looking at all the reservoirs that were big enough for dipping, and we were creating a database that our local guy is planning on calling all the owners and just having that database so that if someone's flying over, they would be able to immediately click on some software and pull up who owns what and give them a call and ask if they could dip. So yeah, we're doing it. Yeah. Director Schwartz.
Thank you. And a great presentation. It's such a critical tool as we see stream management plans, et cetera. How quickly will the database be updated in real time in terms of how often frequently you doing that, and so people can reliably get current information?
That's a great question. So Hydrabase is updated in real time, essentially through the division offices. There is a process of provisional records to final records, and I'm sure Kevin could probably answer this better than me. But there is a review process of records that happens. So there is, in some instances, there's a delay of diversion records. In some instances, there are provisional records that are provided. And then in other cases, there are, for structures that have telemetry, gauges, some of the larger diversion structures, those are available every 15 minutes in real time. And those are usually the major structures around the state. So it varies a little bit, but that's the gist of it.
Director Goebel?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. And thanks, Brian. We're very thankful for our new toys in the Arkansas, our admin tools. I bragged about them last board meeting, my director's report. And I also wanted to mention that they're pretty user-friendly. I was asked to speak at a realtors conference at a half-day training on water. And they were just, bragging left and right about it. And luckily they did that right before I walked up there. So that, I got to take some credit for that. But anyway, very, very useful software. So, and thanks for all the work you're doing on ArcDSS.
You're welcome, Jack. Yeah, that is a great example. A lot of realtors do use MapViewer for ownership and research type queries. So it's true.
Great. Thanks, Brian. It's
Thank
really
you.
exciting to see how cutting edge that the agency is and your role in that. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we have a break scheduled. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. I'll ring the bell. Don't stray too far, and we'll get back to it.
Going back to the. And all these little pieces that kind of roll off the tongue and don't necessarily stop. Backwards. Got some intellectual fine tuning. Oh, sure you did. Yeah, that's what people say. This is fantastic. You almost scares you to think what we're doing. Well, you're just fun assignment of playing how simple so Chris would have assembling representatives and speakers that have been 25 years. One was Howard Shultz, one was so I got to play it all. At any rate, some of the questions were how in 1994 you said you had these tools you had that happen. We were so surprised when we had stations in various versions. To some satellites and phone lines to get us that was state of the art. It was incredible. And I said, now last Saturday morning I was sitting right on my phone. We have no idea. Andrew.
We gotta make sure this Bluetooth speaker's gonna work.
Glad we have creative people. Rather than, I don't know if I have
Andrew, you still have the microphone. Can't hear you. Still have the microphone.
Oh. They just appear.
Yeah, timing is never very good.
We're live.
Out of sight, out of mind. But once they're around, then I find how weak it is. My wife bought a bunch of jelly beans for Easter. Grandkids.
Okay, welcome back from break. We're going to get going again with item 9, which is the Paeonia Dam Outlet Works Modification MOA Reallocation Request. Alex.
Hello, Alex Funk, for the record, CWCB staff. Today I'm before the board to discuss a Basin Fund MOA reallocation request for the Paeonia Reservoir Outlet Works modification project. Since this is the first time the board will be hearing a Basin Fund MOA reallocation request, I want to take just a few minutes to recap sort of how we got here, and then I'll answer a few, kind of provide an overview of the project itself. Tom Alvey with the North Fork Water Conservancy District is here to answer any sort of technical questions about the modification project the board may have. So the Basin Fund MOA has been in front of this board for the last few meetings, and so I apologize that it's here again. But as you know, this was an agreement that was executed in 2011 between the Upper Division states, the Bureau of Reclamation, and other basin partners to collect excess hydropower revenues from federal facilities for operation, maintenance, and replacement projects at Colorado River Storage Project participating projects, which is always really tough to say. Over the last few meetings, staff and the AG's office have highlighted several issues with the MOA program, mainly concerning with the accounting. There have been several cost increases and other issues that were unanticipated over sort of the course of this program. And that has sort of raised the overarching concern that given the number of projects that Colorado has on the books, that these projects over time could potentially exceed Colorado's MOA allocation, which is set through the MOA agreement, and which could potentially trigger for the state to repay those overages, which is something that staff and others are working to avoid that scenario. And so in order to sort of address these concerns, staff at the March board meeting presented 2 documents before the board. One was an annual prioritization process in which staff would work with the various CRISP project beneficiaries and other water stakeholders across the state to develop an annual prioritization list of MOA projects, with the idea that this would provide a means of scheduling projects with the funds that were available. The second document, and the one that's included in your board packets, is the CRISP MOA project budget adjustment guidance process. And so this lays out in 6 steps procedures in which CWCB staff will consider requests to move MOA dollars from one approved MOA project to another in the case where there is a new projected cost increase associated with that project. In the past, this was not a formal process. Occasionally, CWCB staff would receive an email or a phone call or some other means in which they were informed that this project would cost more than it was originally estimated at in terms of its approved amount, and would then request that increase.
This did not happen every single time, and it did sort of create a sort of confusing patchwork of history on these projects. So the intent of this guidance is to provide a framework moving forward in which staff can kind of go through this process in a way that is more transparent and with the intent to basically minimize any sort of impacts on other approved MOA projects and to maintain Colorado's unobligated MOA, remaining MOA funds, which kind of serve this critical buffer to cost overruns in the future. And so I'm not going to go into the 6 steps in detail. Mainly those first 2 are to determine whether that project is still a priority, and then working with reclamation and the water users to see if there are any alternative approaches that keep that project within its approved amount. If that's not sufficient, you then look at that participating project's own balance of projects to see if there are funds available. If that doesn't work, you kind of go back, have another consultation. Then we would then consider the state's remaining allocation. And then finally, if that still wasn't sufficient, we would consider potentially canceling the project or, basically stating that it would have to move forward within its current scope. The reason I'm before you today, though, is the guidance also includes sort of a trigger clause in that any project that exceeds any reallocation request that exceeds $250,000 must go before the board. This number was developed in consultation with the board back in January, sort of based on if a reallocation request above that amount were to come in, there was potential that it could impact other approved MOA projects and that the board would want to weigh in on that decision before approving that reallocation. So with that, I'll turn briefly to the Paeonia Project before you today. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Paeonia Project, generally it is located in the North Fork of the Gunnison River Valley above the town of Paeonia. It consists of both the Paeonia Reservoir and an enlarged Fire Mountain canal and diversion structure. It serves roughly 15,000 acres of irrigated farmland in the North Fork Valley and just overall a very critical piece of infrastructure for the region. The Paeonia Reservoir is built on Muddy Creek, which is very aptly named in that over time, it has deposited a significant amount of sediment into the reservoir, resulting in about a 25% reduction in storage capacity over time. Initial efforts to address the sediment issue focused on sort of operational changes to the reservoir itself, mainly lowering the reservoir to push sediment further up away from the main sort of storage area of the reservoir and flushing sediment through the outlet structure. 2 issues that arose as a result of these operational changes was that during those low reservoir sort of, operations, that created a blowback into the inlet structure, which caused damage. Also, the outlet structure itself was never designed to be a sediment transit device. So over time, the debris and other issues have caused damage to that structure, which has affected operations of the reservoir itself. There have been several efforts underway to look at alternatives, long-term solutions to the sediment issue that continue to sort of proceed and get more refined. But one of sort of the initial projects was to actually modify the outlet structure itself to better, sort of sluice sediment and to avoid these issues that are resulting from low reservoir operations. So essentially, there was a project that was put forward under the MOA. It was approved by Reclamation in 2016 at $7.8 million. Earlier this year, design for that project was completed. It was determined that those initial estimates were low and that the new total cost of the project would actually be somewhere in the 10.7 million range, including about 7.6 million for construction and then 1.3 for administrative costs. So overall, this is a $2.9 million increase in the potential scope of the project. CWCB staff worked with Reclamation, the Paeonia Project stakeholders and the Colorado River Water District over a series of phone calls to determine first that this project was their top priority. We looked at different alternatives to keep it under scope.
that was not necessarily possible in this case. We actually got rid of some alternatives that made it more expensive. And so we finally decided on reallocating some funds from other Paeonia projects to support this 2.9 million increase. And so Reclamation submitted a request for that back in early April. And I should just note that that request would come entirely from Paeonia's other MOA projects. Therefore, there's minimal impact on other MOA projects across the state, and it does not impact Colorado's overall remaining MOA allocation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the MOA process, this particular project. Again, Tom Albee is also here to answer any questions about the Paeonia modification project in more detail as well.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions for Alex or for Tom? Yes, Director Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess it's for Tom in particular about operational changes you see, one, during the construction, and two, afterwards, and how that might affect irrigation in the North Fork.
Tom, can you please state your name and who you're with?
Tom Albee. I'm president of the North Fork Water Conservancy District. During construction, we don't anticipate any changes in current deliveries or in generally in releases. Going forward, having this repair made will allow us to meet our current obligations and keep operating.
Director Schwartz.
Thank you, Paul. So how do you see the sediment moving through the structure, and at what rate are you going to reclaim, or are you just going to stay?
Our hope is this is a temporary fix to increase the longevity of the project. We're not going to be able to reclaim any of the storage that we've already lost, but we hope we can stop losing more. So the idea is that once these repairs are made, we'll be able to use flushing flows in the spring to remove sediment, keep our storage at about what it is now. To actually reclaim storage is a much more ambitious project that would have other consequences that we're not prepared to go to yet. We may be back later, but for now we want to just keep what we have as best we can.
Director Hawkins.
Thanks, Alex. My question is for you. I read this memo carefully because I was thinking about some of the other MOA projects in my part of the state. And there was a statement in the memo that this would have little to no impact on other projects. And I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for us, if it's coming out of the other Paeonia MOA funds.
Yes. So having gone through those first initial steps of the guidance, determining that this was a priority for Paeonia, and even in the state ranking of projects, this is, a pretty big one. Second, we had to go through, we had to go this route. We then looked at Paeonia's approved MOA projects. So Paeonia has, and I don't have them in front of me, but about 5 or 6 approved MOA projects with about a balance of 12 million. A few of those projects just were submitted, not necessarily, they're no longer priorities for Paeonia, and we're able to cover the entire cost of this project. And so in that statement, it's basically saying that all of the reallocation costs for this particular request are going to be absorbed from Paeonia's own balance. Therefore, there'll be no reduction in balance for projects on the Florida ALP. So none of their priorities or sort of existing balances will change as a result of this project. And then there won't be any funds taken out of Colorado's unobligated funds. Now, all that is to say with the caveat that since there is a cap on the MOA program, any reallocation expenditure does eat into that overall allocation. And so ultimately, these decisions you have to kind of consider them in that context. But in this case, I think the impacts are fairly localized to Paeonia's own balance versus going outside.
Perfect. I just wanted to confirm that, and I would support projects being able to go back and prioritize when they have cost overruns between their various MOA approved projects. So thank you.
Director Anderson?
Yeah, it's kind of my understanding that the outlet works at Paeonia Dam had a flaw from day one, and that this project will eliminate it. You were generating some water hammer in the outlet works. Is that the?
That's correct, Director Anderson. We've had an air blowback problem right from the very beginning of the operation of the outlet works. Part of this redesign will have an air relief that'll minimize that problem. That's what will allow us to operate the outlet at a lower level than we have.
I suspect the Bureau of Reclamation's warranty is long past.
I think that was long past the day after we started filling, but they have been very helpful in the redesign, so I think we'll take care of it.
Are there any other questions for Alex or Tom? Yes, Director Brody.
So, question for Alex. I'm just curious, having gone through this process now, what are the lessons learned and how are you applying that as you look at these other projects and evaluating, budget adjustments?
I think the biggest lesson learned throughout this entire process was that a lot of these early estimates at the beginning of this project, were just that. They were estimates. Every time these projects are actually get underway or the design starts, those costs just balloon to a number of factors that wasn't necessarily properly anticipated at the beginning of this program. And it's something that with hopefully these sort of structures in place long term, we can help sort of minimize or navigate that situation. Colorado is definitely unique in the number of projects that it has and sort of the approach to this program. And that's something that we're definitely thinking. So this will be renewed in theory, those conversations are underway now to continue this program. And we're already sort of keeping track of some of these new sort of fixes potential for the MOA 2.0. And one of them would maybe be setting aside some funds for more pre-design support to get better estimates at the beginning of the project versus having all these things surprise us at the tail end.
Director Anderson?
If there is no further discussion, I move that we pass the staff's recommendation on agenda item 9.
It's been moved by Director Anderson and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 9. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is item 10, Wild and Scenic Rivers Fund Annual Review. Linda.
Good morning. I'm Linda Bassi with the Stream and Lake Protection Section for agenda item 10, which is the Wild and Scenic Rivers Update and Fund Annual Review. In 2009, this board proposed and the legislature established the Wild and Scenic Rivers Fund in the amount of $400,000 out of the construction fund. And that money was made available for the board and its staff to work with stakeholders in Colorado to develop protection of river-dependent, outstandingly remarkable values identified by federal agencies, to develop protection that would be an alternative to wild and scenic designation. And in many cases also to defer a finding of suitability for wild and scenic designation conditions for allocation of the funds. So there are primarily 2 stakeholder groups right now that are requesting and using these funds, and we've been providing you updates at every board meeting, either via an informational memo or in the director's report. Those groups are the Upper Colorado River Wild and Scenic Stakeholder Group. That group has used a substantial amount of funds. They've done some amazing work. It's a very diverse group of stakeholders. proposed management plan alternative that the BLM and Forest Service accepted on the Colorado River, and so in lieu of a finding of suitability. And right now that plan is in a provisional period, so the group is working really hard to finalize a lot of parameters that the plan will operate under. So they've been doing studies and monitoring, and staff from both my section and the Interstate Federal and Water Information section participate in these stakeholder groups and provide input where appropriate. So you have a summary of their latest activities in this memo. The other group is the Lower Dolores Plan Working Group, and that is an offshoot of the Dolores River Dialogue, which was a stakeholder group that met for years, and in 2008 broke off into this subgroup to work on some legislation to establish a national conservation area on the Lower Dolores River. That process is still ongoing. There's still a lot of stakeholder outreach and vetting that needs to be done with that. But in the meantime, on a parallel path, this group has done a lot of really valuable scientific research on the native fish that are the ORVs, the three species, the bluehead sucker, flannelmouth sucker, and round-tailed chub that occur on the Dolores. And they've formed this native fish monitoring and recommendation team. They're doing great work in figuring out ways to benefit these fish. And so we anticipate they're going to request some additional funding this year. There's also always a potential for other stakeholder groups to form. Right now, the BLM's Uncompahgre Field Office is going to issue a proposed resource management plan this spring. The BLM Eastern Colorado Office stakeholder group that were there to support them. The memo also gives you an outline of what was spent last year. And then we've attached the terms and conditions to the memo so the board can take a look at them, because I know we have many newer board members. We went through a pretty extensive update and revision process that this board approved in March 2018. So with that, I can answer any questions. Andrew Rickert also has been working on this, and I can answer questions and then give the staff a recommendation.
Be great. Thank you, Linda. Are there any questions for Linda about this item? Let's go ahead with staff recommendation.
So staff recommends that the board affirm that the need and purpose of the Wild and Scenic River Fund still exists and is expected to continue in the future, and to affirm that the existing terms and conditions for the allocation of these funds are adequate without revisions.
Director Hawkins?
I want to make sure that the board knows that in my day job, I'm the co-chair of one of the subgroups that Linda mentioned, the Dolores River Native Fish Monitoring and Recommendation Team. The Nature Conservancy does not manage any of the funding. I don't believe we've provided match funds for a project in some time, but I did want to disclose that before any vote was taken.
Thank you. Director Schwartz?
Motion. I move that we move forward with the funding, continued funding for the Wild and Scenic Rivers Fund. That's correct language.
There's two items as part of the recommendation. Would you like to include both of those items in your motion?
Yes, including both items.
It's been moved by Director Schwartz and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on item 10. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Linda, I wanted to just thank you for your update, and I appreciate the updates in the director's reports. They're really interesting and well written, so thank you for those.
Good, thank you. I'll pass that along to the others who work on that.
And this is the 50th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic Rivers, is that Is this correct this year?
It's the 50th anniversary of Wild and Scenic.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Or last year was.
Last year, okay.
Yeah, last year was.
So, thank you.
But we can have another party.
Why not? Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're on to agenda item 11, which is the weather modification update. Andrew.
Good morning, board. Andrew Rickert, CWCB staff for the record. Always wanted to say that. I'm going to give a brief overview of the weather modification program and what we've been working on this year. I know we have some new board members, so I would start with we have 9 permitted programming seeding programs in Colorado. You can see that little blue one up there. That's the new Walden aerial cloud seeding program. These 3 right here are the Central Mountain Colorado River program. Central Mountain, sponsored by the Colorado River District and Front Range Water Council, and 7 water providers and 3 ski areas, Breckenridge, Keystone, and Winter Park. You can also see those tiny little ones. That's Vail and that's Beaver Creek. My hand's kind of shaking. We have the Grand Mesa program and the Brown. Grand Mesa program, City of Grand Junction, and several other small water conservancy districts. They also have a weather station, propane dispenser, 4 remotes, and 14 manual operated generators. The Gunnison in the purple. The Gunnison, Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District, with a few other key sponsors. They have a specialized weather station and an Idaho Power Company remote at Keebler Pass to target Mount Crested Butte ski area. Western Dolores right there. North side of the San Juans, the Telluride ski area. Telluride's that one right there as well. And then Eastern San Juans, Pagosa area, and a few small water districts. The Eastern San Juans get some money from the lower basin, Nevada, Arizona, California for their program, but they also get about $20,000 every year from the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission. And then we have over 40 program sponsors. Like I said, 9 different ski areas, many water districts, with a total of about $1.2 million spent a year collectively in Colorado. A couple other funding statistics. Funding is about 53% local sources, including ski areas, towns, and local water districts. State funding provides about 15% of the funding, and the remaining 31% comes from the lower basin and the state of New Mexico. So in summary with this, $175,000 from the state, $590,000 from Colorado local sources, and $345,000 from the Colorado River lower basin. Now, I'm just going to give, a lot of you have already heard this, but just a couple quick updates on things that we did around the state this year. We have our radiometer that we put in Walden. It's similar to a weather balloon. It can see the different profiles of clouds. And the most important thing is it can identify supercooled liquid water within the cloud, which is key for cloud seeding. These are 2 pictures. These are 2 new remote generators we installed over the last summer in partnership with Colorado River District. There's me right there with the install. You can see it's a pretty intense process. They have a boom truck, and we had quite a few people. So these things are pretty heavy duty, and these newer ones that we have are state of the art, and they really do some great things for the state. The one IPC remote is sited at, immediately adjacent to Beaver Creek Village Snowtell. And the second one was at Nova Guides. It's at the Camp Hale. Many of you are familiar with that. And that one is to target both Breckenridge and the Keystone ski area. There's just a final one all put together. You can see that's solar panel. There's where the propane flame comes in and burns the silver iodide solution. Right there, you can kind of see are the tanks that can contain the solution, and there's the propane that's used to burn it. This I just threw in here. This was the final table from the seeding we did in Walden for the Never Summer Mountain Range. There's not a lot of data on it. They only did 3 flights over the course of the season, but like you can see here, this is burn-in-place flares. So on this flight on 2-3, they were able to do 2 burn-in-place flares. This is ejectable flares, so they had a much higher success rate using the ejectable flares, and we're able to use them on all 3 flights. Going forward with this program, we need to do a target control analysis. So we're still working with our project sponsors and able to get that complete so that we can move forward and try to do this program again next year. This I wanted to show. So actually, let me go back and tell you one more thing. I want to let you know for the Grand Mesa, we worked with our contractors to make their program a little bit better this year. And what we found out is, as we all know with cloud seeding, the higher up we put the remote generators, the more they were able to run them, and they got more seeding time and were able to seed more storms. So that was great for the whole program. They also had they have a liquid propane generator, which is different from the remotes or the manuals where it actually just sprays out propane. And from that, they moved that up 1,100 feet and had a 50% better runtime with that. So that was very impressive. Okay, so I want to talk about with this year, as you all are aware, it was a busy year for avalanche and suspension criteria. Several times over the season, and most notably in February and March, we had to suspend seeding operations due to avalanche suspensions. Parts of the upper Roaring Fork watershed and under snowpack seeding conditions beginning in the middle of February, and then a basin-wide suspension starting 3/13/19 and lasted 3/3/21. And that was kind of that. Excuse me. Let me grab a tissue real quick. Sorry. Apologize, that's embarrassing. So I just want I wanted you all the board member to know that we take the suspending of seeding during the course of the winter very seriously. We have this graph that NRCS makes us, and it's kind of hard to see on this one, but there's all these little circles with all these where all different snow tails are, and you can see down here when they're green, you can seed. Yellow, seed with caution. Red, do not seed. So this, obviously, I took this from yesterday. So obviously, we're not even seeding anymore, but you could seed because there's no danger. But then compared to in January, you can see that there's quite a few red ones, which just means those snow tails, they're above average for sweet, so we want to hold off and make sure that we don't put anybody in danger. So we're constantly monitoring this throughout the entire year to make sure that everything's going correctly with our program. But on another note, I wanted to let you know that with suspending the seeding, we also pay attention to closely that if we can extend the seeding operations around the state for later in the year, because almost all the permits expire on March 31st, but our contractors can talk to us and they can request extensions. So in one case this year, as of April 1st of this year, the Upper Colorado River Basin was at 118%. The state decided to extend the Central Colorado Mountain River Basin seeding permit at the request of Frank McDonough and DRI through the end of April. So we're still working with all of our contractors to make sure that we can maximize snowpack around the state year round without putting anybody in danger. So moving forward, we are about on June 24th, we have our Colorado River Basin Weather Modification Technical Committee. And that's where we get together with all of our partners and lower basin partners. And we get together and decide how we're going to spend all the money around the state of Colorado for this upcoming year. And I just want to give you guys a heads up of some of the stuff that we are thinking about. The radiometer, as I showed earlier, we have about 18,000 left on that payment, and then it will belong to the CWCB. So at the end of this, we are going to so after we pay this last $18,000, we're going to own it, be able to move it around the state to help whoever we want. We're considering right now to deploy it in complement to a mobile radar unit for the La Vida Pass burn scar to help Kevin with his early flash flood warning systems. So we can use this instrument not only in winter, but in summer as well. And then we are planning on moving it to Gunnison, this basin, to help with snowpack and data for this upcoming snow year. For the Central Mountain programs, there's a proposal that we are going to buy one new remote generator and install in the Central Mountains. There's also a proposal to cost share on a new remote generator. And this one, we're thinking of placing it near Marble in order to seed both the Gunnison and the Colorado River Basin. So have some collaboration between the basin, which is something we're strongly pursuing moving forward with the Weather Mod program. And Southwest Colorado, we got a new weather station we're planning at the Purgatory Ski area, a precipitation gauge to plug gaps between snowtail sites. In Grand Mesa, we are helping with conversion from cell to satellite modems on remote generators, just so we can get better data and quicker data throughout the season. And in Gunnison, as I mentioned, the new remote generator near Marble to help both basins. I think that's a pretty important project. And the last thing I wanted to mention is we just had our annual North American Weather Mod Association meeting, and there Joe Busto was honored with the Thunderbird Award, which is a pretty prestigious award in the weather mod community. The award recognizes fundamental and continuing contributions to the art and science of weather modification. So I wanted to congratulate Joe on that. And that's it. If we have time, I don't know if I remember, I have that 9 News video for the aerial cloud seeding. If anybody would like to, it's only like 2 minutes long. If you guys want to see that real quick.
That'd be great. Let's watch it. While Andrew's pulling that up, Joe, if you are listening, I know Joe likes to log in and listen. So congrats on that award, and thank you for everything that you've done and all the good work you've done around the state with weather mod and radars and all the good things. So let's give it up for Joe. Thunderbird is a pretty great name for an award. I know.
Yeah, this is a story 9 News did on the aerial seeding program in the Never Summer Mountain Range.
Snow, water. More snow. Water district workers are trying. Drought could use more snow. The water district workers are turning to new methods to try and create it. Jackson County is becoming the first in the state to test aerial cloud seeding. Jackson County Water Conservancy District is working with the Wyoming Water Development Office to bring this cloud seeding method to our state. They're going to use an aircraft to drop flares into winter clouds to create silver iodide as they burn. That's a substance that's similar to ice crystals. That will mix with the small water droplets in the clouds to make snow that is heavy enough to fall. Jackson County just received its permit today to begin cloud seeding, and now they're waiting for the weather to do it.
As soon as the weather conditions are correct, and we have the super cold water conditions colder than never summer mountains, or electric clouds going up and over for the proper seeding so that it can be successful.
Colorado River was to manage cloud seeding operations from the ground for decades, even with some of the Grand counties. However, there's recent research on seeding boulder showing that the aircraft-based cloud seeding are effective. Okay, that's what Jackson County.
And that's it. If anybody has any questions.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. That was great. Director Gibbs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew, really great presentation, really informative. Thank you. I think you mentioned there are, 3 ski resorts, Breck, Keystone, Winter Park,
Beaver Creek.
and Beaver Creek. Are there other ski resorts that have approached you or the office to explore?
We're actually having a workshop with Vail on the 24th of this month to try to persuade them. But a lot of these places like Steamboat, they just think they get enough snow. So it doesn't. And I mean, and Steamboat's my favorite place to ski. So I'm really pushing for them to start. But yeah, we have that workshop in Aspen, and I mean, we'll keep reaching out and trying to get more and more places involved.
That's great. Director Brown?
Thank you. That was really great. Can you explain to me for the North Platte, is it funded? Are all of these seeding programs funded by the same people? Is it to go into a pot of money that is then shared?
So yes and no. We get $375,000 from the lower basin through this agreement we worked out with them. And Colorado gets $375,000, Utah gets a portion of that, and Wyoming gets a portion of that, but it's to all benefit all the states collectively. So when we get that $375,000, I try to, spread it around the basins in a fair and equitable manner so that everybody can benefit from that.
So the North Platte not being part of the Colorado River Basin, you can use it anywhere within the state, and that's sort of the agreement?
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
I mean, we
thank you.
can use anywhere, and that's why we've been partnered. That's one of the reasons we didn't have any programs going on in the Walden area. So that's why we're really excited about this aerial program, and we hope to expand and get more basins involved and working together and more collaboration as we move forward.
Thank you.
Director Trick?
Thank you, Andrew, for presenting on that. I know that we had discussed before maybe trying to find a video of those aerial flares.
Actually going off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still have.
Still looking.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been talking to my contacts up in Wyoming, and they still didn't have
All right.
anything for me.
Keep trying, though. We'd like to see it.
Well, for sure.
Thanks.
Director Mitchell? Director Young?
I just wanted to thank Andrew. Good job. And thank you for mentioning Joe's award. That's great. Just another in our award-winning staff that we have here. Whether it's a weather modification or conservation or our CDSS or whatever we're doing, we're on the cutting edge, the CWCB, and it's just great to be part of it. So thank you to all the staff who does and goes the extra mile to do their work here. So thanks.
Director Anderson?
I'm just curious if you looked at the summer season, modifying clouds and.
I mean, we haven't looked too much as you mean like in hail suppression and stuff we can do in that manner.
Well, or either to increase rainfall during the summer season.
Yeah, all of ours are isogenic cloud seeding is what we primarily focus on here in Colorado. So it's all winter time, but I think that's something we could explore going into the future.
Director Schwartz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this has been a long conversation about weather modification and the effectiveness. So is there data collection that you can look at exactly when when your activities are taking place and what precipitation we may have, there may be some correlation. How well are we able to document the effectiveness of the program?
Yes, absolutely. And in our statute, it states that all of our contractors have to get us their annual reports by June 31st. And that's when we can actually see all the data and see how many storms were seeded and the effects on these storms. So once we get that data in, we'll be able to look at it and prepare, an end of the year report.
Director Mitchell?
Thank you. I wanted to be the last one. And yes, we have received a high number of awards the last couple of years, unprecedented, I think. But I wanted to thank Andrew. This is his first time presenting in front of the board, and he really stepped up. I think we all know the situation of Joe Busto, and so I wanted to thank Joe, but Andrew stepped in and helped to continue to move this forward for the agency. And I think it's incredibly important. It isn't in his job description to have to do this. And I think he's appreciated it. And I think by being able to say isogenics or whatever it is, I think he's learned a lot too. So I think that's a huge opportunity, and we're using the staff in the agency in whatever way we can to move things forward across the state. So thank you, Andrew. You did a great job today, and we look forward to seeing you up here a lot more.
Thanks.
Great. Well, it looks like our next agenda item is lunch. So is it next door? Lunch is next door. Friendly reminder that the lunch is for the board and the staff, but sometimes there are leftovers. And so if members of the public want to hang around until board and staff have a chance to grab their plate, you're welcome to join us. And we'll be back here at 1:00.